single star burned white against an ebony canvas. Its radiance lit the vast dome of the Galactic Assembly Hall, casting faint, sharp shadows on the polished alloy floor. The chamber was shaped like a wide arena, its walls lined with fractal patterns that glowed with the fluid lines of alien script. Above, an immense skylight offered a panoramic view of space, the starfields shifting in gentle arcs as if in silent observation of what was to happen below. Delegates from dozens of worlds had gathered. Some hovered in repulsor chairs, others perched on specialized seats adapted to their biological needs, and many simply stood on their own 2 feet or equivalent limbs. They were as varied as the stars themselves. For centuries, the galaxy had teetered on a knife's edge, with alliances formed and broken in the blink of an eye. Conflict had been held in check by fragile treaties and backdoor deals, the same kind that had collapsed time and again when suspicion rose too high. Now, fear and hostility reached a fever pitch. Accusations of sabotage and covert aggression turned the once proud Galactic Council into an echo chamber of threats. This time, it was rumored, there could be no turning back from war. In this atmosphere, a human had been chosen as the mediator, which was met with not just skepticism but outright disbelief. Humanity was relatively new to the Council, having only recently discovered faster-than-light travel and wormhole technology. Their membership was provisional. Yet, in a quirk of cosmic politics, humans had displayed a curious knack for fostering dialogue where others found only walls. No one could fully explain it, but many starfaring civilizations had quietly admitted that humans were surprisingly adept in the arts of conversation, compromise, and empathy. Some attributed it to their turbulent history, riddled with wars and treaties that shaped them, training them almost by accident to handle precarious negotiations. Into the chamber walked Tala Harrington, the human diplomat, whose presence had become the talk of every starport and council corridor. She was calm, her posture steady, her brown hair neatly tied back in a tight bun. At a glance, she appeared unremarkable, a normal human in simple ambassadorial attire, devoid of flamboyant patterns or cosmic symbols, yet an unspoken confidence emanated from her. Perhaps it was the steadiness of her eyes, or the gentle lift of her chin. Whatever it was, it seemed to hush the hushed whispers as she stepped toward the central podium. Waiting for her there was Marduk Maru, the reigning council chair, a tall being from the Xantharan species known for their leonine heads and retractable spines. He flicked his cat-like tail, betraying his discomfort at the tension roiling through the halls. A half-dozen other representatives fell silent as Harrington approached. She set down a crystalline tablet containing her prepared statements and took the microphone, a disc floating in midair that captured and broadcast voices across the massive space. Her opening words were measured. A simple request: let us speak freely. Let us remember that violence is the final recourse when all dialogue has failed. Her voice carried a warmth seldom heard in that hall. The hush deepened, and for the first time in a long while, delegates leaned in, but had been rabble-rousing only moments before softened into cautious interest. She spoke of how humanity had once stood on the brink of nuclear annihilation. She told of near calamities avoided by a mere stroke of luck, or behind-the-scenes negotiations forged bravely by individuals no one knows, but who changed the course of armies. He acknowledged the cynicism many species felt. Yes, we hear the call for war. Yes, we see how you might think your enemies will never negotiate in good faith. But short of total destruction, who can truly gain from such a cataclysm? While Harrington's words may have sounded idealistic, she pivoted to details of compromise. She highlighted resources that could be shared, intangible assets that were more valuable than controlling a mineral-rich star system. Acknowledge, culture, mutual resilience. Some delegates looked skeptical, whispering among themselves, but Harrington was patient. She invited them to list their grievances, and a chaotic wave of condemnation swept the hall, as centuries of perceived slights or actual betrayals spilled forth. Despite it all, she remained calm, scanning the crowd with unwavering composure. Her focus was on bridging differences, and in that moment it seemed the assembly awakened to the possibility that the unstoppable engine of suspicion might actually be slowed. For several days in a row, delegates met in smaller committees curated by Harrington. She recognized that not every voice would be heard in the grand chamber. Sometimes, vital truths emerged in side corridors or personal dialogues over interstellar refreshments. She dedicated hours to listening, to reading historical records and meeting with archivists, ensuring each faction felt validated. Bit by bit, hostility receded, albeit in small increments. Yet the threat of war was far from extinguished. One group in particular, the Kilari Dominion, demanded retribution for an event decades past, an alleged massacre of their colonists by the gritty Imperium. Stored footage emerged, and the entire galaxy reeled at the images of burned settlements and scattered bodies. The Kilari Dominion's lead delegate, High Warlord Essek, insisted that no peace could be had unless the Greti Imperium surrendered a strategic cluster of resource-rich worlds as formal recompense. The Greti refused, alleging Kilari's sabotage on crucial shipping lanes. These old accusations threatened to reignite centuries of enmity even more violently than before. Harrington's first attempt to mediate these two belligerents ended in a shouting match that nearly escalated to lethal violence. Guards of both species brandished weapons, and in that small conference room, the temperature soared to a suffocating tension. Still, Harrington appealed to their sense of rational self-preservation. For every soldier that falls, for every city that burns, you both lose. A cycle of vendettas will leave nothing but ruins. In the end, you will have no home worlds worth defending. This gave the Kilari a moment's pause. The Greti delegation likewise hesitated, their reptilian eyes glimmering with something akin to fear. Though words alone did not solve the dispute, they at least dispelled the imminent outbreak of laser fire. Harrington recognized how fragile that calm was. It required consistent vigilance, empathy, and assurances that each side's deepest concerns would be addressed. On the 10th day of negotiations, Harrington introduced an unexpected approach: cultural exchange. She suggested that each side host the other's children for shared education programs. The notion was met with near hysteria. "You want our youths to live among potential murderers?" Essek roared. But Harrington clarified, "I propose a strictly monitored environment. Each faction can send volunteer families and children to neutral academies or worlds, with unwavering oversight from the Council. They will grow up seeing each other as fellow sentients, not monsters from propaganda reels." Many still scoffed, yet Harrington pressed on, weaving a nuanced plan with mandatory safeguards. She believed if they could sow enough seeds of understanding among the young, eventually the cycle of hatred would break. This radical idea took root, not because it was idealistic alone, but because it was systematically structured. Harrington showed how the cost of war, measured in resources, lives, and intangible losses, would be far higher than investment in a generation of carefully guided cultural exchange. The concept broke into specialized subcommittees, and heated discussions ensued. But the cracks in the once impenetrable walls of hatred grew a bit wider. A new wave of tension awaited, however, in the form of the Zeraxian Collective, a species relying on collective telepathic connections, always suspicious of outsiders. They had endured infiltration attempts in the past that nearly compromised their entire network. Now, they demanded absolute secrecy regarding the location of their queen's brood planet. "Trust is a two-way street," Harrington counseled, "but we cannot ensure your security if you refuse even the most basic transparency." Zeraxian ambassadors hissed with agitation in unison, a telepathic wave of collective rancor. Still, conversations followed. Harrington proposed an encrypted corridor, maintained by the Council's central AI, that would allow the Zeraxian brood planet coordinates to remain undisclosed while providing enough data to the Council to deter clandestine aggression. It was complex, but it fostered the beginnings of uneasy cooperation. Harrington's diplomacy extended beyond official sessions. Late at night, she made discreet visits to Delegates' quarters, sometimes bringing small gifts from Earth. An antique piece of music, a sampling of Earth literature, or even a modest Earth plant that could thrive in varied atmospheres. She asked questions about their homeworlds, their personal fears. In doing so, she built personal bridges, often lacking in grand political negotiations. Trust, she reasoned, was founded as much in personal relationships as in formal treaties. Days became weeks. The Greedy and Kilari still glared at each other from across the negotiation table, but the immediate threat of open warfare slowly ebbed. The Zyraxian brood planet location remained a well-guarded secret under a newly formed encryption protocol. Other species, such as the Takari and Brill, found themselves cooperating in archaeological excavations that might reveal lost technology beneficial to all. Moran Decoul, the Aeolian representative, took a personal liking to Harrington's approach, championing her cause in the broader council. An era of cautious optimism started taking shape. That optimism was tested more severely than ever on the eve of the Council's final summit. A hidden, extremist faction from the Gredi Imperium, furious at the perceived concessions, orchestrated a major cyber attack on Kellery defense grids. Automated defense satellites spun out of control, unleashing a barrage of energy beams toward Kellery shipping vessels. Alarms echoed across the entire Council, and panic spread. The Kellery Dominion held the Gredi responsible. Warlord Essek threatened to launch an immediate retaliatory strike on Gredi worlds if the sabotage was not reversed. The Gredi government insisted it was the work of rogue agents, and they pleaded for time to regain control of the satellites and present proof. All the progress toward peace now stood on a precipice. Harrington jumped into action, convening an emergency session in the assembly hall. The tension felt suffocating, each species preparing its own contingencies, possibly even on the verge of launching their fleets into interstellar war. "I stand before you all," Harrington declared, asking for restraint. "We have spent weeks forging trust. Do not let a rogue faction sabotage all we have built." She beseeched the Kellery to stand down, if only for a few days, to let the Gredi track down those responsible. She invoked the newly bolstered intelligence-sharing framework, referencing how representatives from neutral species could help root out the extremists. "If they are truly rogue," she said, "then let us punish them together for jeopardizing the entire galaxy's future. Let us unify our intelligence resources to unmask them. If the Gredi government stands in complicity, the entire council will hold them accountable. But violence now would only condemn us all." Her words echoed across the hall. The silence felt electric. Slowly, Hisak's furious expression softened. He hammered his four-clawed fist on the table. "All right. As a sign of respect to this new era of negotiations, I will hold my armies back for 72 hours, but no longer." The Gredi delegates, desperate to avoid a genocidal war, agreed to swift collaboration. The entire council mobilized a joint investigative team, aided by advanced forensics from the Takari and the telepathic skills of the Zyraxians. The extremist faction was exposed in under 2 days, their transmissions revealed, their leader apprehended near a hidden base. They had planned to frame the Gredi government while igniting war, hoping to seize power in the ensuing chaos. That crisis narrowly averted. Harrington called for a final treaty to be drafted, a wide-reaching accord that included resource-sharing provisions, new conflict resolution mechanisms, and a pledge of open borders for educational and cultural programs. The negotiations stretched well into the night. Experts from countless disciplines haggled over specifics, while Harrington kept the bigger vision cohesive. No single faction got everything it wanted, but there was a sense that finally the galaxy was committed to building peace rather than fueling conflict. The signing ceremony took place in the same assembly hall, but it felt transformed. There was a hum of cautious celebration, a feeling that a new page in cosmic history was turning. Each delegation stepped forward, scanning the holographic treaty in their own script or mind link process, then affixed their signatures, some with a flourish, others with an understated nod. When it concluded, a gentle applause spread, joined by a ripple of telepathic approval from the Zuraxian ambassadors. Warlord Essak stood solemnly alongside the Gredi representative, each clasping arms in a gesture that their cultures recognized as a symbol of grudging respect. Days after the treaty signing, the galaxy experienced an exalted calm. News channels from distant star clusters broadcast images of the Council's signature event, and while that calm contained an undercurrent of uncertainty, habits of fear and distrust die slowly. It was a moment the galaxy had never quite known. For centuries, the galaxy had been a place of fractious alliances and simmering feuds. Now, for the first time, a broad-based alliance was forged on principles of understanding, compromise, and mutual growth. Skeptics wondered if it could last, but the seeds had been planted more firmly than ever before. Harrington refused to bask in glory. Instead, she continued her work, traveling to newly participating worlds to solidify cultural exchange initiatives. One day, she visited the outer rim colony of a minor species called the Lalori, who had historically been overshadowed by neighbors and rarely involved in council affairs. Yet, in that quiet outpost, young Lalori children gathered in newly erected schools funded by the Inclusive Treaty's resources. The children learned about each other's histories, from the Gredi to the Kalari to the Earth humans who had once nearly destroyed themselves but found a path to unity. Harrington watched them wide-eyed in lesson halls, forging friendships that transcended species, a sight once unimaginable. After several months, she returned to Earth briefly for diplomatic outreach, greeted by cheering crowds who had followed the Council crisis through every newsfeed. The world had rarely been so united in pride for one of their own, representing the best of the planet's capacity for dialogue. Standing in the grand courtyard of the Earth Diplomatic Center, Harrington felt overwhelmed by emotion. Painted banners read, "Words over weapons," a phrase that captured her entire mission. But she reminded the crowd, "The work has just begun. Peace is not a single moment. It's a living, breathing entity we must nurture every day, across every star system." She oversaw the creation of new agencies designed to support the complexities of a multi-species peace. To address environmental crises on war-ravaged worlds, specialized teams of eco-engineers were dispatched. Ambassadors specializing in memory wiping or trauma therapy offered sessions for entire populations, still haunted by centuries of collective mistrust. And though pockets of resistance or extremism flared here and there, they were met with a united and concerted approach. Negotiation before aggression. Empathy before conduct. Slowly, trade routes flourished. The Aeolians, known for their delicate thistle harps, now performed concerts for species that once deemed them enemies. The Kalari and the Gredi co-engineered a new starship engine that integrated shield harmonics from both civilizations, a testament to what once had been unthinkable. The Zuraxians found new trade partners among species once frightened by telepathy, discovering curious ways to blend their mental networks with advanced quantum computing. Research centers sprang up across the galaxy, where scientists from myriad worlds collaborated on breakthroughs once locked behind nationalistic pride or the fear of espionage. Harrington did face criticism. Some believed the treaties gave away too many privileges or that certain species had garnered unfair advantages. Others insisted that war was still inevitable, that humanity's meddling would only delay the carnage, but the results stood firm. Fewer skirmishes, fewer starships patrolling borders in constant readiness for battle. Diplomacy had gained momentum. In time, a formal peace council was created, a permanent body with representatives from every species who had signed or would eventually sign the accords. The new council's headquarters took shape on a neutral moon near the center of the galaxy, an ancient place dotted with geysers of luminescent gas that glowed turquoise under the star's light. Harrington was asked to take a seat in that council, but she declined a permanent post, believing that no single individual should hold influence for too long. Instead, she advocated a rotating chair system. She continued as an advisor, traveling from star cluster to star cluster, bridging gaps in understanding, painstakingly forging a stable galactic community. Over the years, a new generation of beings, human and alien alike, grew up never having experienced the yawning dread of imminent war. They beheld starports teeming with travelers of all shapes, colors, and anatomies, busily trading knowledge, crafts, and hope. The pulse of industry turned from producing weapons to building interstellar infrastructures for renewable energy and faster communication systems. Space had once appeared as a place brimming with hostility, but now it exuded a cautious unity. There were still arguments, still misunderstandings, but now they were handled through carefully meditated dialogues. Speculation arose about Harrington's legacy, raising the question of how a single human had swayed the course of the galaxy's future. Some said it was a matter of luck, that timing and a confluence of events had allowed her words to resonate at just the right moment. Others pointed to her deep empathy, her incisive knowledge of historical pitfalls, and her skill at forging connections. In truth, it was a combination of all these factors, hard work, combined with intangible sparks of opportunity that only a patient negotiator could harness. Eventually, even Harrington yearned for rest. She found a moment to retire on a quiet planet called Tularis, known for gentle pink seas and crystalline beaches that shimmered at twilight. There, in a small, airy house, she wrote her memoirs, not for personal fame, but as a testament to the thousands of beings across the galaxy who had helped avert catastrophe. She recounted nights spent huddled in cosmic corridors, forging fragile deals. She remembered how easily everything could have shattered under the weight of old hatreds, and she wrote about the courage of individuals, human and otherwise, who chose to trust, even when fear threatened to consume them. Much of the galaxy never knew the full complexity of those negotiations, the near misses that could have ignited unstoppable conflict. What they did know was that a remarkable shift had occurred. As the decades rolled on, a generation that had once thought war inevitable now found itself attending cross-species celebrations, trading goods from newly thriving economies, studying side by side in grand academies that encompassed the wealth of knowledge from countless star systems. Ancient resentments, while not erased, were tempered by the simple truth that, working together, had done far more good than the once seemingly inevitable dance of destruction. History books of many worlds told the story differently, weaving legends and recounts bizarre enough to border on myth. Some portrayed Harrington as a mystical figure capable of mind control, a rumor started by those who could not fathom the power of honest words. Others wrote of her as a clever manipulator who used psychological trickery. But for those who knew her, she was simply a diplomat who believed that words, spoken with unwavering integrity and compassion, could outmatch any weapon. At the 1000th session of the Peace Council many years later, a tribute was offered. The entire council, now vastly expanded with newly discovered species, paused for a moment of silence in honor of those who laid the groundwork for peace. It wasn't simply Harrington that they praised, but the synergy of countless advocates, the heroic efforts by delegates from every corner of the galaxy who had insisted on dialogue in the face of aggression. In that moment, surrounded by swirling cosmic lights visible through the transparent walls of the Council's dome, the memory of near-apocalyptic wars seemed almost surreal. Despite the galaxy's occasional relapses into tension, scholars agreed that a profound turning point had been reached those many years ago. What was once a collection of mistrustful species now thought of each other as co-builders of a future. Borders, while not erased, had become bridges. Ancient battles for territory gave way to a mutual pursuit of survival and shared prosperity in the vast cosmos. And so, the improbable phenomenon that one human had set in motion continued its trajectory, weaving new stories of unity throughout the stars. In the twilight of her life, Harrington sent a final message to the Council, from her home on Tularis. She thanked them for the honor they bestowed upon her, although she maintained that it was their collective effort that had shaped history. "I am only a single voice," she wrote, "but a single voice can inspire a chorus if people choose to listen. Please continue to listen to one another across every boundary of space." She died shortly thereafter, peacefully watching the pink seas reflect the fading glow of the star. Within days, messages poured in from across the galaxy, tributes both grand and humble, some from the largest star-faring empires, others from tiny colony outposts. Each message contained a spark of gratitude and resolve. The galaxy carried on, forging its path under a mantle of tenuous but prevailing peace. Fleets still existed, strategies were still drawn, but war was no longer a reflex. Trade ships and cultural exchanges outnumbered destroyers patrolling the border. Academies bulged with students learning the histories of species once locked in mortal combat. Long-distance transmissions radiated across the cosmic dark, bridging not only space, but also countless once rigid cultural divides. A chapter of galactic history had turned to reveal the splendor of what could be achieved when words, not weapons, guided the destiny of nations and species. And though the future would bring its own trials, there was a sense among all that what they had accomplished together could never truly be undone. Because they had seen, if just for a moment, the unlimited horizon a united galaxy could reach, one shaped by dialogue, empathy, and the unwavering conviction that lasting peace was worth the struggle and sacrifice it demanded. And so, the galaxy watched, remembered, and carried forward. The ripples of that one human voice continued echoing through distant galaxies, carried by hopeful souls determined to protect the miracle they had built. They looked up at the stars with the promise that tomorrow did not have to repeat the tragedies of the past. They had finally learned to speak, and in speaking, they had learned to live in peace.